All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Baruch Kodash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone, who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations unto the Akim her pushing this gospel in truth and in sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon all your houses. This is Brother Quana Wath from the Arizona Great Millstone Camp. Come back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. You know, when I came across this, post, if you will, earlier, man, I had to take a screenshot, but it was heavy, right? Speaking on, America, right? How America, is becoming, well, I'll just read it. It says, it's by a dude named Big Brother Mike. It says, and this is on the Newsbreak app, a post I seen on the Newsbreak app, right? It says, I wonder if people actually realize we are witnessing a shift in social norms in this country. We are on our way to becoming a pariah state and or a rogue state. Whether you think this is good or bad, it's happening right before our eyes. Look those terms up for yourself and see if you agree. And that's exactly what I did, right? I want to start with the rogue, right? A rogue state, right? That was the first thing I looked up. I eventually looked them up, looked them both up on, Chat GPT, which we're going to touch on. But, I ultimately want to, hey, what is a rogue state, right? So I first looked up that word rogue, right? It says rogue, this on the online etymology. And we're going to drop down. It says by 1570s generally as dishonest, unprincipled person, a rascal. And this is exactly, how America has been, ultimately, acting within the earth, right? The scriptures talk about, that Esau, would ultimately deceive the world, and Esau has definitely deceived the rest of these different nations, man, more in particularly here in America, right? Where, that the image of the beast, right, was ultimately being, pushed directly from, right? Which that image goes back to a philosophy, that was pushed by America, and the beast being, NATO and the EU. Right, America using, the EU and NATO, right, to ultimately push that, that image, but America being the main one, right, to ultimately push it, and got these nations, right, ultimately thinking that, hey, America's got, the people of these nations thinking that America's got golden cities and thinking America's oh so great, when in reality it was all deception, man. It was all a lie. And see, a lot of these nations are now starting to wake up, to that. Let's grab this real quick. Grab precept, while we get into this. This is Jeremiah chapter 51 and verse 7. It says what? It says, Babylon hath been a golden cup in Yahweh's hand, right? That made all the earth drunken, right? See, again, drinking of that, that wine, right? Which is, again, that image, right? It says the nations have drunk of her wine, because a lot of these nations have ultimately gotten in bed with America, man, right? They believed the lie, and they ultimately started allowing all these different things that America was allowing within their own countries, right? The different fast foods. They adopted English, I got a lot of these women became, westernized, man, and started acting like these Western women today. And it was penetrating the shit out these damn countries, man. And now, again, the Lord Yahweh Bashim Shai is having everything be revealed. So now these nations are like, damn, it was all just a lie. It was all a dream, It was all a lie, from the very beginning, right? That's why it says, therefore the nations are mad. And again, the nation at one point were bugged out, but now the nations are actually pissed off, Let's go back, right? It says a dishonest, unprincipled person, right? Rascal, right? It also says, it says in reference, right? In reference to something uncontrolled, irresponsible, right? Undisciplined, right? Esau, Edom, man, fucking damn devil, right? He's rogue. Now I want to, ultimately and looked up, both of them together, right? What is a pariah state or a rogue state? And we're going to drop down to the rogue state. We'll come back to that pariah state, right? It says a rogue state is more of a political weapon word, especially used by the U.S. government starting in the 1900s or the 1990s. A rogue state isn't just unfriendly; it's accused of actively threatening world order. The main charges usually are sponsoring terrorism, and then we just seen that, right? Because America has been, funding a lot of these, terrorist groups, man, right? The whole, the 911, right? America ultimately backed that whole situation, man, because really it was just a ploy, right? Really a false flag event, so they can pass the Patriot Act, right, in order to get people to basically to succumb to, allowing, their privacy, right, to be infringed on, which is against the Constitution. But Esau wanted to do it, right, as he does, right? He wants to do it without, the least amount of resistance, right? So he does that fear mongering, right, and to get you people, just like he did with the Crown Vic Royale, right? He did the same thing, a false flag event, right? Which granted, the sickness, whatnot, or dis-ease, right, was ultimately real. Esau was, fidgeting the numbers, right, blowing things out of proportion and giving you people a poison, if you will, right? And it got a lot of you people based off of, him lying to you, deceiving you, right, playing up those numbers, again, that fear mongering, and got you a lot of you people, man. But again, what happened? It turned out to be a lie. It turned out to be deception, But it says pursuing weapons of mass destruction, right? Which America just shot off a 130,000 pound nuclear missile right from the bottom of the ocean, right? It says showing aggression towards neighbors, which America has, right? America just, ultimately is infringing on Venezuela, right? Pushing up on Venezuela, right? About these different, the drugs and whatnot, putting on, tariffs on Canada and Mexico, right? At one point you had Canada ultimately dropping, a lot of, American whiskey off the shelves, right? So as it says, showing aggression towards neighbors, that's what America's doing now, right? It says defying international law in ways that seem destabilizing, and America's funding what's going on over there in Israel openly funding what's going on over there in Israel, which is what? Defying international law, right? Genocide, coming after Qatar, firing on Qatar, which is ultimately, attacking, right, Qatar's, sovereignty, It says countries like North Korea, Iran, Iraq under Saddam, and Libya under Gaddafi have all been branded rogue states. But because the term is subjective, critics argue it's often used less as a neutral category and more as a justification for sanctions, military buildup, or intervention, right? And America does that, right? America will ultimately label a state, right, that they ultimately want to take the resources, or they want to remove, the political leader, right? They'll ultimately cause some, and dedicate that state as a rogue state, in order to go in there and do what they have to do to remove, basically a coup d'etat, right? To overthrow the government and set up their own government. But see, America's been acting as a rogue state, man. America has been acting as a rogue state, which, matter of fact, let me go. I think I have, because I want to drop down a little bit. I said, is America operating in both pariah and a rogue state? It says right here, it says from the U.S. Western perspective, America does not label itself as either. Of course, it says it portrays as a stabilizer, rule maker, and promoter of democracy within Western alliances, NATO, G7. The U.S. is the opposite of a pariah, and it's the hub of the club, right? It says from other perspectives, right? It says some states and movements, the U.S. is seen as both pariah and rogue. Now, again, I want to drop down and focus on rogue, right? It says rogue-like traits. The Iraq War is the classic case, launching a full invasion without UN approval under the doctrine of preemptive war, looked very much like rogue state behavior in the eyes of much of the world, right? So again, this is America sitting here saying, we're going to make war, with Iraq. We're going to go ahead and do what we have to do, and really don't have any, real reason. They make up a reason, like, they have weapons of mass destruction, right? Go in there, make war, and really what they're doing is they're, a coup d'etat, or they're stealing resources, or anything along that lines, right? It says drone strikes and covert operations in sovereign states, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, are seen as violating international law, right? It said the U.S. maintains one of the largest nuclear arsenals and modernizes it while demanding others halt theirs, a double standard often used by critics to brand it rogue. So America has been operating in a rogue state, you know, for a very long period of time, man. You know, for a very long period of time, right? And again, see, that goes into the second half of this, right? America operating now as a pariah state, right? Because again, a lot of these nations are seeing what America's doing, right? A lot of these nations are you know, saying, you know what, screw America, you know. And I had a video, so let me see if I can pull it up. I'm not gonna play it, right? It's right here, right? It says and that's a dope picture too, man. It says petrodollar collapse, Saudi Arabia and Russia end oil sales in dollars, right? Which they're in the process of, you know, as well as China and you know, other nations, right, that are part of the BRICS nations and whatnot. They're ultimately getting rid of the dollar, right? Saudi Arabia just a few years ago, right, had an agreement, a 50-year agreement, you know, that you know, to ultimately, you know, trade and sell oil, right, in the you know, the petrodollar, the American dollar, right? But see, they didn't want to renew that treaty. They didn't want to renew that agreement. Why? Because everybody is being done with America, man, right? It don't just stop here. I looked up as well on Google. Just I said, you know, what countries within the last 5 to 10 years have ended and rejected to re-sign treaties with America, right? And it says, and I'm just going to read the, you know, the AI overview, just a few of them, right? It says within the last 5 to 10 years, several countries have ended or refused to renew treaties and agreements with the United States. Russia has done so with multiple arms control agreements, while other countries have rejected more recent trade or environmental deals, right? It says Russia, right? It says immediate range nuclear force treaty. It says the U.S. withdrew from this Cold War era pact in 2019, citing Russian violations. Russia followed by ending its participation as well, right? It says it said, we'll just drop to the last bulletin. It says conventional armed forces in Europe treaty. After years of suspended participation, Russia formally withdrew from this treaty, which limited the deployment of conventional military equipment in Europe, right? But it says Iran, right? And this one was recent as well, right? You know, Iran ultimately basically backed out of, you know, this treaty, or America did, you know, and then, you know, Iran as well, right? But now, you know, America's trying to get, you know, Iran to sign that treaty again, and Iran's saying no, right? It says Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. After the U.S. withdrew from its nuclear agreement in 2018, Iran ceased its compliance with the deal's restrictions. You know, so Iran said, no, you backing out, we backing out. And again, America tried to ultimately get, you know, Iran to basically, you know, renew this deal, but Iran wasn't having it. Right? It says other countries regarding, you know, trade deals, right? 2025, in response to new U.S. tariff policies, several countries, including China, Mexico, and Canada, did not have trade deals in place. Other countries, such as Taiwan and India, were listed as facing new tariffs for not having a deal. So, man, a lot of these countries are sitting there like, nah, we ain't going to get into a deal, you know, with, you know, with America, right? Which also goes back to that, you know, again, you know, that fascism, right? Attacking, you know, or sorry, it goes back to not that fascism, the rogue state, right? Attacking your neighbors, right? Basically coming up against your neighbors, right? So, and these nations sit there, you know, saying, hey, you know, we've been, you know, having these deals with you and whatnot, and now you're attacking us. You know, you're putting more tariffs on us. You know, you're ultimately hurting our economy. You know, so these nations are saying, no, you know, we ain't messing with America no more, which again goes back to that second point, that pariah state, right? America's been operating, you know, as, you know, a rogue state, right, for so long. These nations are catching wind of it, and now America is being moved into that pariah state, right? Right, which goes back, right? We're going to jump all the way back up. It says, and again, the question, what is a pariah state or a rogue state? It says pariah state is more like a social label. Think of it as a country that has been sent to sit alone at the lunch table because nobody else wants to be seen with it, right? So everybody's like, nah, we ain't fucking with America no more, right? It says a pariah state is isolated or shunned by much of the international community because of its behavior, right? Things like human rights abuses, aggressive wars, or refusal to follow international norms. The term is descriptive rather than legal. It signals that the country has become an outcast. Examples that have carried this label at different times include apartheid era South Africa, North Korea, Myanmar under military rule. And that's all it's going to give, right? It says pariah state, shunned, ostracized, diplomatically isolated. Nobody wants to deal with America no more, man. You know? America is seen as the fucking bully right now by many, many, many of these nations, right? And really, it's starting to look that way, you know, for America's allies, right? They're starting to look at America that way, right? Which is prophesied that would take place, man. That the Lord will ultimately turn, you know, America's allies against it, you know? Let's grab that. I want to grab it in the blue letter in Obadiah, you know, if I can grab it in the NLT, you know, because it's heavy. Again, it speaks on that, right? Come on. It says, Obadiah, verse 7, it says, all your allies will turn against you, you know? And again, it's because of America's behavior. They're funding the war with Ukraine, right, against Russia, right? Which, you know, America is, you know, ultimately trying to not necessarily aid Ukraine, right, while at the same time aiding Ukraine, you know? And then, you know, you got the EU saying, you know, we're going to back up, you know, Ukraine, right, and give it NATO Article 5, like, you know, a protection, whereas America is not, you know, helping Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine like that, you know, when you know, they're saying that they need it, you know. So you got the EU sitting there saying, hey, what the fuck, America, you done got them into this situation and now you're not willing to help them out. No, we're gonna help them out, man. So they're ultimately, you know, moving, right, without, you know, America's approval, right, when America is supposed to be the head of the beast, right? Again, the beast being NATO and the EU. You know, they're not with what, you know, how America's moving, even with, you know, with Israel, back in Israel, right? You even had a lot of European Union, like Brussels and whatnot. You had a lot of, you know, European countries saying, hey, they're not with that attack that happened on Qatar, you know, but America didn't, you know, condemn it. You know, America didn't condemn it, right? It says all your allies will turn against you. They will help to chase you from your land. Right, meaning they're going to fully turn against America. You know, the European Union, a lot of these NATO countries, right, these UN, you know, countries are going to turn against America, who have at one point been in bed with America or been allied with America. You know, it says they will promise you peace, right? They're going to smile in your face, right, and play your game, right, let you, you know, be puffed up as they're doing right now, right, letting Trump think he's all big and bad, right? But it says what? It says, while plotting to deceive and destroy you, right? Revelations, the 17th chapter, the 16th verse, you know, where it says that, you know, you know, those 10 horns shall hate the whore, right, and burn her with fire, man. You know, meaning they're going to be shooting those nuclear missiles at America, right, which is part of that, you know, assembly of great nations we read in Jeremiah 50 and verse 9. You know, it says your trusted friends will set traps for you and you won't even know about it, man. You know, again, America has been operating in such a rogue state, right, for so long. Now the nations are hip to it. So not only is America operating in a rogue state, but it's operating in a pariah state as well, right? Being excluded, right? Being pushed out, being ostracized, right? Because of its behavior, because of the wickedness that it's been pushing in the earth. You know? And again, America's got it coming, man, because America is due for destruction, right? America is ripe for that destruction. It's been doing all these different nations bad for so long, you know, and we're not even talking about what, you know, America, right, has, you know, done to, you know, the Israelites, the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, right? That alone is going to be such a great punishment, right? But now you got, on top of that, America has pushed wickedness and deception upon these different nations, man. And these nations are going to respond, right? Because America continues to be that bully. America continues to think that it can deceive the rest of these nations, man. And these nations ain't having it, you know? And no matter what America tries to do, you're not going to be able to pay these nations off. You're not going to be able to sit here and try to, think you're going to be able to get away with it, right? The scriptures talk about that. Your gold and your silver, right? Matter of fact, let's grab that. Let me go back to the KJV. They shall not regard, right? Isaiah 13 and verse 17, right? It says, behold, it says what? It says Babylon will fall to the Medes, which the modern day Medes, right, are, the Russians, right? And again, we quoted in Jeremiah 50 and verse 9, it says what? And I'll bring an assembly of great nations from the north country, that north country being Russia, correct? Because Russia is going to be, the number one nation to ultimately fire off missiles against America, right? They're going to be the ones that ultimately really, come hard against America. Right, scriptures talk about the least of the flock shall draw them out, right? Drawing out these different other nations, and see, Russia is going to be that guard unto these nations, man. So they're going to be like that big brother that comes and says, nah, you ain't fucking with my family, and ultimately goes ham. And see, that's going to be Russia, right? Which, as we're reading in this verse, right, it's talking about the Medes, which are the modern day Russians, right? It says, behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver. And as for gold, they shall not delight in it, right? So they're saying, nah, fuck that. It ain't nothing that you're going to be able to do. You can't pay us off. You can't sit here and think that, you're going to be able to continue to, because really America is laden with thick clay, right? That debt. But America owes a lot of debt to a lot of different countries, mainly China, China holds, the largest portion of American debt. But see, America, right, is not really paying on that debt, at all. Right, which that's an issue as well, right? But it says what? Their bows also shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children. Meaning, what? America is going to be hit with ICBM nuclear missiles, man. And everybody here outside of the elect, right, that's still in America is going to be destroyed, man. And this is why, again, the sentiment is to repent, right? The message being pushed out, right, is to repent and turn to Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. Right, because if you don't, you're going to receive of this destruction that's going to come upon America, man, and that's it. If you follow this damn devil, you're going to be destroyed right along with them, right? Speaking to you Israelites, you so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans that are oh so fucking gung ho for the white man, especially even in within Israel, these false leaders and these wayward ass camps. If you continue to follow this damn devil and you want to, delight in this damn devil system, hey, well, you're going to go do it right. You're going to go down right along with it. You're going to be thrust through, man, as the scriptures say, right? It says, and Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees excellently shall be as when the Most High overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what America is going to be. Destroyed, man. Right, you look at Sodom and Gomorrah, nobody can inhabit that land over there. Nobody has. That land is a desert. And see, America is going to be like that forever. As it says right here, it says, it shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, meaning you're not going to have nations coming over here, setting up shop, right, sending that money back. Because again, the American dollar, as we're seeing, is being destroyed even before America fully gets destroyed. Right, the America's power, right, is being stripped from it, right? That power is that dollar, their ability to deceive, right, is being taken from them, right? It says, neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there, but wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. And the wild beasts of the islands shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant palaces. And her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. That's right, man. Right? So we're coming upon that time where America is going to be completely destroyed. Right? We're already seeing, again, these nations are seeing that America has been operating as a rogue state for so long. Right? And now, right, America doesn't see that it's in a pariah state. right? Where these nations are starting to exclude America, to ostracize America, right? And push America off, right? Esau is completely blind. Trump and his administration is completely blind to the fact, you know? But I just wanted to bring that out, man. Lord wills edifying, Lord wills straight to the point, man. You know, I'm going to give all praise on the Lord to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rachak, Kodash, double honor to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders, the great millstone, who rule very well, very beautifully. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. The water Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, forgive me the spirit to do this lesson, edify the sheep of Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, the elect, right? Lord will, you know, come back with another lesson, you know. But again, Lord wills edifying, Lord will straight to the point. Until next time, I say shalom.